Yeah, I thought it was on the other side of town, because Grandma was dead by the time Grandpa got to Glendale.
Yes.
So I think it was, I don't know, I remember it's out of Washington Boulevard somewhere. Anyway.
Okay. And tell me Grandma's dogs' names again, because I want to write it down.
Chang,
Chang.
Blackie, and then I'm blank. And I gotta, but, because Chang and Blackie are the two, I absolutely know there's four of them at different times.
Okay, so you're in charge of.
I don't know how the hell I'm gonna figure it out, but I know Blackie and Chang.
You're gonna do the cars and the
Yeah.
dogs.
Cars,
Things he loves.
Cecil wrote down the cars, and Mary probably knows where that list is, because it used to be in the safe deposit box. But your mother's too goddamn cheap to get a safe deposit box, so she got in her frickin' drawer somewhere. But
I
anyway.
don't think that is like vital information.
No, but it was
priceless
something,
information.
it was something you always wanted to know where
It
it
is
was.
right at this moment.
Well, it was Cecil wrote it out, and I wanted to,
Yeah.
I wanted to know where
I'm
it
sure it's
was.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Your mom had a chow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Chang.
Chang was a chow.
Yeah.
Cecil used to take Chang to the ice cream store
That's a
and give him
serious
like,
dog.
ice cream. Well, they had, they gave him away, or they did something with him, because he was mean.
The one
People
that dog.
thought he was mean.
Okay, well, he wasn't mean. Well, she said he was, he liked Cecil, and he liked her, and he liked Grandma and Grandpa, but
Yeah, he had an attitude.
he didn't go too far. I know Blackie was the one that was shot.
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was Blackie. And there was two other ones. See, my mother used to tell us stories, or at least tell me stories, about when she was growing up and her dogs, and she would tell me all these stories, and Ethel used to tell me stories too. But Blackie and Chang, I will figure it out.
Was it? And when they lived on, I think they lived on Cedar Street in Cresco.
Okay, I think you're right.
John
John went there one
The
time.
Burgesses lived across the street. They were very good friends. They had two older daughters that were more like Ethel's and Claire's age. So they all went to school together. And then they had a little boy, and he was more Mama's age.
Yes.
And neither one of them, they played together all the time, but neither one of them could pronounce the other one's name. And he was Joseph, and she was Elizabeth. So she called him Jobus,
Uh-huh.
and he called her Sippy.
Sippy.
So she went by
Sippy.
Sippy.
Yeah.
When she was little,
Yeah.
for quite a
Sippy,
while.
Jovis and Sippy, I remember that.
Yeah,
And then on the other side of the street, or down the row, was the Mills.
I didn't know where Elizabeth lived.
Yeah, she lived in Cresco. She was
Uh-huh.
Elizabeth Mills, the Mills family.
Yeah.
And she
So-
lived in Cresco. I wasn't sure where. I don't know exactly where in town she lived, but
Yeah.
you remember Aunt Elizabeth,
So Cecil married Elizabeth Mills.
right?
Claire married
Gertie.
Gertrude.
What was her name?
I don't remember her last name, but the family all thought she was Bohemian.
Oh yeah, they.
didn't
Oh
think
boy,
much of her,
boy, they
I'll
didn't
tell
like.
ya.
They didn't like her at all.
On the day they were getting married, Grandpa was refusing to go to the wedding, and Grandma got him by the neck or something. Said, "John, you get your clothes on. You are going to this wedding."
Oh, they didn't.
She made him.
They
go
didn't
to
like
the
Gertie,
wedding.
and I can understand why.
You know, she was a little different. But,
Oh,
but
she was a
Yeah.
good. She was a good
she
person.
I think she loved to socialize and
Have a good time.
you have a good time.
Down to
Good
the
way to
alibi
put it.
room.
Yeah.
You had to go down to the alibi
alibi
room.
And when she died, Mama
You
and I
went.
and Frank, and I think you went too, to Gertie's funeral,
Yeah.
and then we went back to Clarice's house
Mm-hmm.
afterwards. And Clarice was saying, when it got to the point they had to put her in a nursing home, a care home, and she says her mother just loved it. They would put on performances.
Oh, really?
Plays
Yeah, Gertie was,
and singing things, and Gertie was always right up
She
there
was a
in it,
character.
and she just loved it. So
And her and I don't know where it fits in all this, but it was when we lived in Wasatch, and they lived down below Washington on
over by the alibi room.
Oh, well,
Culver
the alibi
City.
room was at the end of the street.
They were they lived in Culver City.
Okay, was
So
that
that's-
exactly where it was? Yeah.
Yeah, on the other
It's
side
down
of
on the other
Venice
side of
Avenue,
Washington.
down.
I remember
Did
that.
anyone stay in Iowa? Sounded like
No,
everyone
no,
ended up
nobody
in
was left.
California.
Nobody
Yeah.
left.
Everybody
And,
left.
and Claire and Gertie rented that house. They never owned a house that I know of.
Yeah. No,
And they rented
always
that
rented.
house on, and I gotta tell you, I could probably find the name of the street, but anyway. And they rented that house, and Claire worked, I wanna say for a series of, but at least he worked at a few dealerships.
Did-
Yeah, and Claire was the financial manager at a couple of car dealerships, and that's what he did.
Mhm.
And they rented that house, and they had Ginger and Clarice,
Mhm.
and little Joe.
See the other friend.
Remember little Joe?
Yeah.
And his 55 Buick?
Oh
He had
my.
a 55 Buick Super. It was green and white. And little Joe couldn't reach pedals.
Yeah,
But
and
he
he
had-
was little.
But he had power seats. He didn't have any of those days. And he had to have power seats in that Buick because he couldn't reach the pedals.
Oh
And
God.
little Joe was their drinking buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They
the
were
alibi
friends
room was
for
their
many
drinking
years.
haunt. Yeah.
Anyway, so when they were in Cresco and Grandpa had the car dealership, I believe they were fairly wealthy.
They were. They were well off.
I mean, Mama had a cleaning lady that came in. She had a lady that came to help her with the wash because they didn't, they were out
Right.
back on Monday with the boiling pot of stuff, scrubbing on the scrub boards and
Oh, yeah. And,
hanging stuff up. But she said Grandma had her backyard was kind of divided in half with a walkway going out from the house. And she had all flowers on this side, just rows of flowers, and all of her vegetables on the other side. And they would can the vegetables, even canned meat.
meat.
And that to me just, you don't hear about that nowadays. They put it in the jars, just like they did the tomatoes and the whatever
I
else.
didn't, but they were well off. I mean, I don't think they were really rich, but they were well off.
Well, and Grandpa joined the country club so that in the summer the kids could go down to the country club and go swimming.
See, now I remember some stuff. You remember much more of this than I do.
But,
And Mama said, later on, of course, Claire and Ethel and Cecil earlier on, she always had a new car to drive when she learned to drive. And she wasn't probably 16, they were younger then, I think.
Yeah.
But she always had a new car because your dad owned
Well,
the
Dad
dealership.
had- yeah.
Yeah, so she always had a new car to
Yes,
drive.
yes.
And,
And they did, and then they'd go down to the Turkey Creek in the summer and swim down there. That was fairly close.
Well, and I know
by.
too, another side note, I know that when Cunningham Motors was in Cresco, obviously, and they didn't have car transports, and these big car transport that bring the new cars. And Grandpa and Cecil and Claire would go to Chicago and drive the new cars, down to the dealership, and that's the only way they could get them.
Oh, okay, that, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they went to Chicago
Uh-huh.
and brought the cars back, and I think Mama, when she got of age, I think she did some of that too.
Oh.
She told me.
And
Yeah, they had,
I didn't know
because again,
that.
they didn't have, and they didn't, I don't think they had a train near them,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they didn't have transport, so they was to go literally physically drive the new cars down. It would have been interesting. It kind of pissed me off that, 2 generations later, my grandfather had a car dealership. And here I am.
Well, you did okay.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
you were always gonna either do something with cars or be a baseball player.
I know, and I knew I couldn't be a baseball player, so I ended up doing something with Mickey Mouse. But yeah, and I think she did that. She did some of that when she was older.
When he was, I don't know how old you were, maybe 10, 11, 12, something. One day, we were living on Briggs and one day, he was so sick, he couldn't go to school and all, and I'm feeling bad for him, so I went in
You
and
should.
sat down on his bed and was talking to him and come to find, well, he wasn't really sick, but it was opening day of the World Series. He wanted to watch it. So.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, and of course this is a contest, but it fits in the recording somewhere. Ethel became a huge baseball fan.
Yes, she did.
She had the Dodgers on every night on the radio.
Uh-huh.
She'd take us to Dodger games.
Yeah.
You know, were you with us the first time?
I don't remember the Dodgers.
We went to Dodger Stadium like 2 weeks after it opened, right, in '62.
I remember when they were building
And
it.
Ethel took us. And I don't know if you were with us or if it was one of my friends, I don't remember. And they hadn't put the bollards in that mark off the parking areas. So 52,000 people after the game just went like this. You know, you make it up now, but I think we stood in traffic like for an hour and a half. Because remember, there was no line, there was no parking lot demarcation or anything. People just. But she became a huge baseball fan.
Yeah.
Ethel did. Yeah.
And the only way out of that place was down that one road towards what probably wasn't the freeway back then, or through residential.
Well, and in modern times, Steve and Heidi and Mary and I just did it last 2 years ago, and Mary and I, when we lived there, we'd always end up on the wrong side of the stadium. Because if you ended up on the kind of the Glendale side of the stadium, you know, you kind of know where you're going. But if you end up on it's not Boyle Heights, but
Elysian Park.
Elysian Park, and it's like, you're on the wrong side. But anyway, that's a side note. But Ethel became a huge Dodger fan, which I thought was kind of cute.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, I want to go
Okay,
back,
go back.
then
Way back.
to
Who had the Wayback Machine?
Daddy's
Cartoon character.
Back to the Future. Oh.
No, there was a guy that had the Wayback Machine in the cartoons and television cartoons. Anyway.
Daddy's
Oh God.
beginnings. Now he was born
In Winfield,
In
Texas.
Winfield,
He was born in
Texas.
Winfield, Texas. He's buried in Winfield, Texas.
yes, and that's where the cemetery is.
Yep.
But Daddy had 11 brothers and sisters,
Yes.
and we'll write them all down at some point on.
I can do it right now for you.
And I know you could, but I'm not gonna write them down. 'Cause
Oh, I'm gonna record it.
Ever. So
It's easy.
anyway, and his folks, as far as I remember, and now they lived actually in Arkansas when OK was born.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
Now, OK used to say, now you don't know if he was joking, because you'd ask OK, where the heck did you get the name O period K period? And he said, well, I think I was the only one born in Oklahoma.
Oh.
Now that's what he said. Now, I don't know if that's true.
Okay.
That may not be true.
Now my story that
Okay.
I heard
Well, I just asked OK, that's just what he
is
said.
somebody asked him where he got the name OK, and he says, when I was baby, I was in my bassinet, and my sister came over and looked inside, and she said, hey, he's okay.
But don't you think they would have named him before he was in the bassinet? I mean, really?
Hey,
I was 3 months old, didn't have a name, and my sister came on, so I was okay.
I want those kind of stories, and that's what
I know,
looking
but
for.
because he told me, I think he told Mary that. I think I was the only one born in Oklahoma. But anyway, I have no idea.
His best joke was always, what's okay stand for? He goes, just all right.
Just all right. Just all right.
Just
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, he always say that. Just all right. And he always wanted me to play Stagger Lee. Every time he came over the house, he said, "Can you
He
play
was so
Stagger Lee
funny.
for me?"
Is that
He
right?
was
Yeah.
fabulous. Anyway,
But anyway,
I don't
Brandon,
remember Arkansas.
they lived in Arkansas for a while,
Okay, I don't remember
and
that.
then it came back apparently and got their plot of land there and their home in Winsboro.
When Winsboro after Winfield. Are you saying they went from Winfield, where he was born, to Arkansas and came back?
No, I thought they went to Arkansas first
And then
because
Winfield.
Winfield, because that's where he was born, but then they moved on to
Winsboro.
Winsboro, and they probably all within 20 miles of each other.
Yeah,
They're all out there in
Winfield
East
is not
Texas.
far. You've never been to the cemetery yet.
Yes, I went to the cemetery.
Where did you go? We went
When
twice.
I went back to see Daddy,
Okay. We went twice.
we went.
Mary and I.
different-
Well, I went once, and then Mary and I
Oh.
went once.
You know,
Well, obviously we
John
buried-
and I
We
went
buried him,
together.
didn't we? We buried him, didn't we?
Well,
Yeah.
before that. When we went back to see how he was doing.
Did we go to
we
the
went to
cemetery?
the cemetery, cause he walked around and
North of
pointed out.
Ruth and next to T.
Yeah, but he pointed out everybody.
See, now, I don't remember that.
Dixie was over here and somebody else was
I
over
do
there.
not remember that. I mean, I remember when we went to see him, I remember when we went to Leon's, I remember all that. I don't remember going to the
Yeah,
cemetery.
yeah, we went to the cemetery.
Oh, yeah, but anyway, then they had the clay pits.
Then they had the clay pits and they started a pottery and that was their income.
Yes.
And then Grandpa, Perry Crockett Turner,
yeah.
died. And he died fairly young.
Relatively young. He
But
wasn't,
they
he
had
was
12 kids before he died.
I think he was in his 60s. I mean, he wasn't a kid, but
Well, I mean, he died a lot earlier than
yeah,
most.
right.
Anyway, so there was Grandma Turner with this pottery,
12
and
kids.
Lawrence and Clarence worked in the pottery.
They did. And one of them died at the potter's wheel.
Yes, and they got to win a fight one day out in the pottery, and apparently got in a fist fight or something, and broke all kinds of finished pottery.
I didn't know that.
Oh my goodness, they got in big trouble
From Lily?
for that.
Lily?
From Lily, yeah.
Grandma Lily. Lily Coleman
Lily Coleman
Turner. Yeah,
That was Grandma.
yes.
And I don't know a thing about
We have no idea.
anything going back further, except that one of Daddy's family, cousin I think, did a family history, and it's someplace.
You've got it.
But I've
I've
got a
never
copy
seen
of it. John made me a copy of
I've
it.
never seen it.
Cause that was the one that went back to the 1700s, and there's an unknown Jemima in there that,
And Jemima.
but, well, Daddy said no. No way.
But you say you have that. You could pull it out somehow. You could find it.
Yes, but I've got it there in a special place.
Yeah.
Special
you-
Safe deposit box.
Feel like Mary.
Place.
I know I put that somewhere.
Oh,
Well, okay, so all the kids, so I know Theron was the oldest.
Yeah.
T.
Lawrence and Clarence.
Well,
On and on.
it was a T in honor, and then it went Clarence and Lauren. I can do it more, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, they made pottery. So I don't know if all of them were in it. I don't know what the rest of the kids did. I
I
have no
don't
idea.
know, but I do know that during the Depression,
Yep.
Daddy joined the Conservation Corps,
Yep.
and he ended up after that in Utah in the National Guard.
I didn't know the National Guard
That's what
Really?
he told me.
Oh, if he
He
told
ended
you.
up in the
because I thought he
National Guard.
rode the rails for a while. Got
Well,
on riding rails.
That may be too.
I
He
thought.
might have been doing that, but
Now, who is this?
Our
Our
dad.
dad.
Our dad.
our dad. Now, Bill, maybe you can tell me this. I know that during the war, he
Yeah.
was a communications person. He was a chief petty officer.
In the
but
Seabees.
In the
He was
Seabees,
in the
and
Seabees.
he did the communications because he said the Marines went in
Cleared it.
and then the Seabees went in.
Build the airstrips.
And the guys were building the strips, and he and his group were setting up the radio communications.
Whatever it was, I think. Yes, that is true.
Okay, and I know he was in Guadalcanal.
Yes.
Do you know where else he was?
Okinawa. Now, okay, so stop right there. We'll keep going. But where was that book? Where is the book?
I have the
Do
book.
you have the book? Okay, so maybe that'll tell you something. I think Okinawa, Guadalcanal, and I couldn't tell you beyond that.
I
And
do.
then- maybe that was-
Okinawa, they did, Guadalcanal, they did Iwo Jima.
He was not. I don't think he was. I don't think he was.
You
Never
know what?
heard.
The night
Never
he
heard.
retired, and we all went to his retirement party.
Yeah.
In the history that somebody was up there talking about it, Daddy, he read off several.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, I'm blank
I
because
don't remember.
I know he's at Guadalcanal. I know he was at Okinawa, and I know that Mama said, because he didn't talk about it a whole bunch.
No, he didn't.
I know that Mama said that. Well, Mama said a couple things. Mama said number one, he was never the same after the war. But she also said that one time he was in a foxhole under attack, and the guy next to him had his head blown off.
Now that was Lilybell said that.
Did Lilybell say it? Somebody said it.
Lilybell
Lilybell
said
said
that.
it, okay, so.
Yes.
We don't talk about stuff like that.
No, they never talked, her dad didn't either.
Oh,
They never
Dad
talked about anything.
talked about the war. Yeah.
And he never did, but that was Lilybell said, okay. But I